Ever wondered how your superannuation stacks up against everyone else your age? Because the Australian Taxation Office just released its latest numbers, and for a lot of people, they're going to sting a little. But stick around, because this isn't about making anyone feel bad about their bank balance. It's about giving you an honest benchmark, and more importantly, a game plan to close the gap, whatever that gap looks like for you. Let's start where everyone starts, your 20s. For Australians aged 25 to 29, the median superannuation balance sits at $21,742 for men and $21,048 for women. Pretty close, right? At this age, the gender gap hasn't really opened up yet. The averages are a touch higher, $29,044 for men, $26,569 for women, but that's mostly a handful of higher earners pulling the number up. Here's why the numbers look like this. You've probably only been in the workforce properly for 5 or 6 years. The super guarantee, the compulsory contribution your employer makes, only reached 12% of your wage from the 1st of July 2025. Before that, it was lower. So early balances are always going to look small. That's not a failure, that's just math. But here's the pitfall that quietly costs young Australians real money. Multiple super accounts. Every casual job, every hospitality shift, every retail gig can spin up a brand new super account if you don't nominate your existing one. And each account charges its own fees and sometimes insurance premiums you don't even need. 3 forgotten accounts with $2,000 sitting in each could be quietly bleeding you $150 to $300 a year in duplicate fees. That's money that should be compounding for the next 40 years, not disappearing into admin costs. The fix takes about 5 minutes. Log in to MyGov, find your super accounts under the ATO section, and consolidate them into one. Done. And here's a genuinely underused government scheme worth knowing about in your 20s, the Super Co-contribution. If you earn $47,488 or less in this financial year, and you personally chip in $1,000 of your own after-tax money, the government will match it with up to $500 for free. That's a 50% return guaranteed before your money's even been invested. Few things in finance are that generous. Now, your 30s. For the 30 to 34 bracket, the median balance is $42,962 for men and $38,070 for women. Averages climb to $58,461 and $49,446 respectively. This is where the gap starts to widen. Partly pay differences, partly career breaks that tend to fall more heavily on women in this decade. For context, industry benchmarking built around the ASFA Comfortable Retirement Standard suggests being on track around age 30 means having roughly $70,500 in super. That figure assumes you'll own your home outright by retirement and receive a part-age pension alongside your super. It's a track, not a guarantee, and it moves depending on lifestyle assumptions. Why does the gap between men and women widen so noticeably in this decade? A few overlapping reasons. Career breaks for caregiving tend to land here more than in any other decade. Part-time and casual work, which naturally attracts less super, is more common among women in their 30s. And the gender pay gap itself flows directly into contribution amounts because super is calculated as a straight percentage of wages. None of this is an individual failing, it's structural, which is exactly why the catch-up strategies later in this video matter more for some people than others. 2 priorities matter most in this decade. The first is structural, salary sacrificing into super. Contributions made this way are taxed at just 15% instead of your marginal tax rate. Say you sacrifice $5,000 a year and you're on the 32.5% tax bracket. That's $750 in super tax instead of $1,625 in income tax. You just kept $875 working for you instead of handing it to the tax office. The second priority is simpler to say and harder to do: grow your income. Every promotion, every job change, every pay rise flows straight into your super at 12%. So building your career is quietly also building your retirement. Your 40s get a shorter mention here, and that's deliberate. At 40 to 44, the median balance is $116,076 for men and $85,804 for women. Averages sit at $150,305 and $117,067. This decade tends to run on autopilot. Mortgage, kids, career peak, less headspace for fiddling with super settings. And honestly, that's fine. Consistency beats cleverness here. There's no dramatic new tactic to chase in your 40s. The single most useful thing you can do is a 5-minute annual check-in. Confirm your fund's fees haven't crept up. Confirm your investment option still matches your timeline. And confirm you're not accidentally paying for insurance you don't need. If you set good habits in your 30s, this is the decade where you let them compound quietly in the background. If this kind of benchmark breakdown is useful, this is a good moment to hit subscribe. There's a lot more of this coming. Now we reach the 50s, the decade where pre-retirement planning gets real. For 50 to 54, the median balance is $192,196 for men and $134,309 for women. That's where the gender gap peaks at roughly 43%. Averages, meanwhile, jump to $271,498 and $205,029. And notice how much further the average pulls away from the median here. That's a small group of high-balance Australians dragging the average upward, while typical balances tell a very different story. This is exactly the decade to know about the concessional contributions cap, currently $30,000 a year for the 2025-2026 financial year. And if your total super balance is under $500,000, there's a catch-up provision. You can use unused concessional cap amounts from up to 5 previous years, all in one go. If you've been under-contributing for a few years, this can let you make a much larger tax-effective contribution right when it matters most. 2 goals worth setting by the end of this decade: get a firm handle on your mortgage, know exactly when it'll be paid off, and calculate your actual retirement number using the ASFA Comfortable Retirement Standard, rather than a vague guess. Which brings us to the pointy end, your 60s, specifically the 65 to 69 bracket, right around typical retirement age. Median balances here sit at $230,766 for men and $207,187 for women. Now here's the math that matters if you're planning as a couple. Combine those 2 median balances and you get roughly $438,000 total. The ASFA Comfortable Retirement Standard says a couple needs around $730,000 at retirement, assuming you own your home and receive a part-age pension. That's a gap of close to $292,000 for the typical Australian couple walking into retirement right now. Let that sink in for a second, because it reframes everything we've just walked through. Even at the very edge of retirement, the typical Australian, not the outlier, not the high-balance minority skewing the averages, is falling short of the benchmark. And that's not a reason to panic if you're older. It's a reason for urgency if you're younger. The earlier the extra contribution, the longer it has to compound, and the smaller that gap becomes by the time you get here. Think about it this way. An extra $50 a week contributed in your 20s has roughly 4 decades to compound. That same $50 a week, started in your 50s, has maybe 10 to 15 years left to work. Same habit, wildly different outcome, purely because of when it started. That's the entire story of superannuation in one sentence. It rewards time far more than it rewards timing. One thing we haven't gone deep on today is how your investment option inside your fund, growth, balanced, or conservative, changes these numbers dramatically over decades? That's a conversation for another video because it deserves proper space. For now, remember the single biggest lever in everything we've covered. Small, consistent, extra contributions started as early as possible. Not a windfall, not a lump sum, just consistency.